Hey guys, first Regardsman here, and I'll be talking about every single heroic weapon in Space Marine 2 Patch 14 on the public test server. Now, I've played with all of these for about like 50 to 80 hours now. I have a lot of thoughts on them, especially since a lot of their heroic effects have actually been data mined, and how they properly work is now known in the game, because for a while, we didn't actually know how things like the Salamander's Power Sword even worked, and they were straight up broken on a lot of the classes in the game. So the first one I want to talk about here is the Combi Flamer. I think this one is overall, like as a weapon archetype, in a pretty good spot. The damage here, however, is a lie. The 8 firepower is not 8 firepower at all, as opposed to the relic tier automatic version. This one does way more damage on the headshot, and this one actually does less damage than artificer tier version for like whatever reason. That being said, a bolt carbine is still incredibly powerful on the artificer tier, so this gun is still really strong, and the burn effect here is nice to have. The ammo economy kind of sucks, but I'm pretty sure it's a bug, because at the moment on the PTS you cannot get back ammunition for the Pyre Blaster outside of loadout stations, so hopefully they fix that up. But as long as they buff up the ammo economy and the damage here to like properly match the relic tier variants, I think this one will be a very strong option, especially on classes like Vanguard and the Sniper that previously had no flamethrower option. So this one pretty good, it just needs some like number buffs. Now the next one I'll talk about here is the Salamander's Power Sword. Now, I made a whole video talking about why this weapon is actually kind of cracked. The heroic perk effect over here is called Nocturne's Retort. Perfect parry or to empower the blade and deal 1 more damage to the next light attack in speed style. Hold up to 5 empower stacks. The parry window is smaller. So the parry window on this is identical to a block weapon. It's also identical to the Argent Edge. So really not too bad. And the way this actually works is that every time you get a perfect parry, your next speed style attack will give you a 300% damage bonus, and the empower stacks do not wear off. You will just spend them over time in your light attack styles, and on the PTS they will also function after that first light attack on things like Power Rake, Power Whirl, and your Ground Pound. And because of that, this is the best fencing power sword by far. Like, it pretty much completely outclasses this one outside of speed. Like, even the 11 base strength here, it is still way better than this option. And the shortened parry window, as long as they actually buff up this perk effect, like do proper burn damage in the official patch, because I think the Burning Blade should do some kind of burn damage. I think this will be in a really good spot, and that lower parry window is actually a pretty decent trade-off for how strong this could potentially be. So really, this one was overhated, and the reason for that is that it was only functional on the assault class, and on top of that, you had to jump through some hoops. Like, it would only work on this class if you swapped your loadout in-game after initially taking it. So it was actually impossible for a while for people to find out how this one worked, which is why it kind of sucked, but it's actually not too bad. Next one here is the Deathwatch Combi Power Fist Inferno Pistol variant. This one really needs tracking, because the heroic perk effect here is called Burning Impact. Pause after any light attack to enter a stance, and light attack again to fire a Melta Blast and inflicts the burn status. At the moment in the public test server, this will not have any tracking on enemies whatsoever. You pretty much have to have them perfectly line up for you, and otherwise it is impossible to pull off. And if anything staggers you while this is going off, you lose the effect entirely. So I think this one needs a serious look at. I think this is actually probably the worst of the melee selection currently, even though the Power Fist itself is very strong, and a 16 strength, 6 speed, and 13 clean potential weapon, that is good. Like, let's not be, you know, let's not mince words here. This is a very strong weapon in terms of actual damage, because the Power Fist is the Power Fist in Space Marine 2. It is the overall best archetype for melee weapons in the game. But that being said, this heroic perk effect is not really doing anything for the Power Fist, and you're better off just taking a normal balance one for more strength and breakpoints, or a block version. So they really need to buff this up for that tracking, because if you want to make this one usable and not just an absolute gimmick, you will definitely want to buff up the tracking on this option. Now, the final one for the melee selection is the Lord Executioner's Axe Heroic Thunderhammer. This one is good. This one's good right now out of the box. I have a couple things I want buffed on this one. I've used this one the most out of all of the melee options. I have to say, the spinning effect here, Whirling Strike, Aftershock is replaced by a powerful spinning attack, hitting 5 or more enemies with a single attack, grants 1 Adrenaline Surge stack. This perk is incredibly potent and incredibly fun to use in the game. I might actually prefer this one over the normal Thunderhammers, hammers, because the aftershock here, the spin, the backswing of this one is incredibly powerful at catching enemies that you would completely miss on a normal aftershock. The increased speed here feels really nice, and the block defense type is just strong on the thunder hammers in general, because they really do benefit from stagger, and this one also gives you free stacks on its own with a hero perk effect. So if you're looking for a melee weapon just buy out of the box on the official patch 14 release, this one is already good. If they make 0 changes to this, I would still use it in the game. It's not like the top tier weapon in all of Space Marine 2, but it's definitely a strong option and will serve you well against both Chaos and Tyranids. Like, they did a pretty good job on this one, and even though the animations are a little goofy and all the execute animations on this are identical to normal Thunderhammer, that is because you can just swap the skins over to normal one if you want to have like a proper hammer experience, but that's up to you, and this one's actually in a pretty good spot. Now, for the final range weapons here, we have the Salamanders Melta Rifle. This one is super fun to use. It really just seems like a number tweak, just like the Combi Flamer does. The hero perk effect here is thermal charge. Shots have increased range and narrow spread, but need to charge before firing. This one basically turns your Melta Rifle into a lore accurate Melta Rifle that's a single target, high piercing damage, high range weaponry for, you know, just blowing through armor and blowing through hordes of enemies. It's really good at triggering perk effects down here like Trick Shot for killing 5 enemies with one shot, because basically you'll just fire your Melta from a mile away at a bunch of Hormagaunts, hit every single one of them, obliterate them on that 10 piercing and 20 range and 14 firepower, and then also stagger any Majors at that range. So this gun is super fun. My main problem is the ammo economy kind of sucks on classes like Vanguard, even with the perk here Decisive Reload, because you're just getting less value at close range than you would on the other relic tier variants. And also the damage here, I think, to buff this up a little bit, because this thing hits as hard as like a normal Melta at the moment, which I think it needs to hit significantly harder given the charge up time, because that's a pretty significant downside. And even though the range here is very good and the piercing is very high like all the other Meltas, this one could really use that base damage buff. And I think a lot of players, if they get their hands on this and it doesn't have a higher base damage, they're going to think it kind of sucks. So Saber, if you're ever watching this for whatever reason, please up the base damage of this when we get into the official patch. And also, for love of God, give the Burning Blade here an actual burn effect, because without a burn effect, it's just kind of a goofy ass weapon to have a skin that is literally on fire and no burn effect. So please, on like maybe like 3 or 5 in power stacks, give it a burn effect. Now, as far as the final weapon goes here, we have the Deathwatch Stalker Bolt Rifle. Now, the stats on the PTS are completely bugged on this weapon. These do not properly reflect this weapon like at all. The headshot multiplier here is kind of garbage. The piercing on this is non-existent, and the reason for that is the hero perk effect is called Auspex Shot. Landing 5 successful shots in short succession creates a small Auspex scan area. Cooldown is 8 seconds. So basically, you have to hit a single target 5 times in a row, and because of that, I think their game will not properly function on this hero perk effect if they didn't turn the piercing down to 0. So like, it has to be only one guy. If you were to pierce through and hit multiple guys, it would probably reset the effect. That's the only reason I could see them actually changing the stat over here to this. And also the fire rate of this being rate of fire 1+, that is a blatant lie in the PTS. This is one of the fastest firing options, pretty similar to the rate of fire version. So this one's pretty fun. It's very accurate with a 10 accuracy like all the other ones, and it also just fires very quickly, so it's pretty fun to use. However, the Auspex shot area here, or the Auspex scan area, this is not a normal Auspex scan. It has nothing to do with the tactical Auspex. This is completely independent as an effect on the PTS, and the way this one works is that you will get a 20% buff on this Auspex scan area to Minoris enemies, a 15% buff to damage on Majoris enemies, a 10% on the Extremis, and a 5% on the Terminus. So it's really not that strong of an Auspex scan area at all, though I will say the funny thing is this one will stack its Auspex on the Auspex of TAC, because they are completely separate, and because of that, none of these perks like Concentrated Fire or Precise Calibration affect this weapon at all. So if you were ever curious about like taking this one on your tactical and being like, I'm gonna double up my Auspex scans, well, it's a completely different weapon, so it doesn't actually trigger the Auspex perks whatsoever, which is pretty funny. But I think they really need to buff this one up. Honestly, if this was a standard Auspex scan area that gave you a 50% buff flat to every enemy in the Auspex scan zone with 8-second cooldown on top of the 20% to Terminus, that would feel way better. This one feels a bit underpowered on that Auspex shot, and also it feels a bit underpowered because currently on the PTS, it is only functioning on body shots and not headshots at all, which kind of sucks. But as a pure gun portion, this one looks cool. It's fun to use as a weapon. I think the weapon stat spread here feels pretty good to play in game. The heroic perk effect just needs a bit of work, and that is pretty much all there is for the heroic weapons in the game or their heroic perk effects. Now, some other feedback I want to give here is that if we are moving into a more difficult boss scenario, stuff like the new Terminus, Chaos Terminator Sorcerer, I think having some of these heroic weapons be a bit stronger on launch is totally fine. I mean, we are already nerfing the burn on the Pyroblast. I think we really don't want to launch these brand new heroic options for players in an underpowered state, because even though Saber is afraid to generally overpower things in the game because they have a far easier time releasing things weak and then buffing them afterwards, because then players don't complain. Because if you do have a very powerful weapon in Space Marine 2, like the Pyroblast Burn Auspex, and then you have to retroactively nerf it, players will complain about that. But if you release a weapon as like a dog shit item, they'll complain, but you can always buff it up. So that's really why I feel Saber is often releasing these weapons like such a dog shit state in comparison to where they wind up, because they're afraid of player, backlash, really, which is pretty fair, to be honest. But I have to say, in the case of things like the Combi Flamer damage, in the case of things like the Salamander's Power Sword, please keep these weapons in a good spot on the launch. And for the love of God, again, I think the #1 request I have in all of Space Marine 2 patch 14 is give the Burning Power Sword a burn effect. The burn effect is already in game. It is right there. I don't think anybody is going to complain if you make this weapon a little strong. And will this weapon be stronger than the Block Power Sword? Probably not. Like, this one will still probably be the best option in the game, but if you give this one like a burn effect on 3 or 5 power stacks, I think that would just alleviate all the issues players are having for the most part on this thing's heroic perk effect, because a new player will read that burn, they'll be like, oh, it's a burning blade that lights guys on fire. Because fast weapons in Space Marine 2 feel really nice on the melee weapons anyways, and a fencing power sword is really one of the most entertaining weapons in Space Marine 2, so giving them a strong option with like a slight downside in the parry window that lights enemies on fire, I think that make this like the de facto go-to weapon for any new player in patch 14. That's all I would like to say in this one, guys. Let me know what you think about the heroic weapons. I know a lot of these were very confusing on the initial launch. Player opinion has changed a ton because we just didn't know how half the perk effects worked because they were bugged until Datamines, and that's just the way this patch actually came out on the PTS. But hopefully these are all fully functional on the official patch release. And if you like content like this and you want to watch me live to ask me questions about the game, or just come see all the new builds on the official release, you can find me here on YouTube or on my Twitch with a link in the video description, and also a link to my community Discord. And as always, thank you for watching. Take it easy, and if you're a channel member, I super appreciate you guys because you help me make content like this every damn day, and I just want to say a gigantic thank you for that. Take it easy. Bye.